أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمسابنا بأبي الحسن مولانا علي بن أبي طالب عليه الصلاة والسلام. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The topic is Imam Ali and God. And since we have at our disposal 3 talks, I thought we would begin with the godly attitude of Imam Ali when it comes to his personal being, his responsibility towards God, his attitude towards community, and the need for him to leave behind a righteous, just, and a godly example within the community. Now, we often forget in our analysis of Imam Ali Salamullah alayhi as to the person that he was and what he was striving to do and the impossibility of the task that was ahead of him. There is no doubt that the circumstances of the birth of Imam Ali and the fact that he was raised by the Prophet almost as a fostered child of the Prophet has had an indelible mark on forming his mind, his outlook, his personality. He was endowed with the godly example of the Prophet and, of course, was extremely conversant with the message of the Quran. He was not about gaining power or controlling the Ummah. That was an accidental feature of his person. Just as the Blessed Prophet, when we look into it very carefully, we will find that the Prophet's role has never been to govern a community. Theirs was an essential role of molding the hearts, directing them to the completion of their own potential, and creating a global human community that is a godly community. And that stands in line with the khilaf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As far as the temporary role of the Prophet was concerned as the head of the state, it was accidental. And it was an intervention by Islam to govern the bodies at that point. But the essential role of the Blessed Prophet was to create conditions in which the hearts would flow towards God in any given context. We need to look at Imam Ali in that way. Now, in the time of the Blessed Prophet, the Muslim community was very embryonic. They were just becoming acquainted with Islam. And a lot of the Muslims, as we know, did not know much about Islam. They were embracing the new religion. Well, it was a new thing around at that time, or that it appealed to them generally and it gave them justice and a sense of belonging and a greater power. Not all of the people who embraced Islam embraced it with same motivation, as it's quite obvious. This is how the human community is. We want to belong to something because it offers us something meaningful to an extent, but we don't understand the entirety of what we are letting ourselves into. Sometimes there are selfish motivations. Now, that was the community of the Blessed Prophet, a very big community. After that came the most sensitive patch of directing this community accurately in the absence of the revelation. This required a godly and a righteous human example. So the biggest devastation upon the Ummah undoubtedly was not giving Imam Ali the position of a Khalifa after the demise of the Blessed Prophet, and therefore the Muslim community veered off the direction of godliness, which it may not have had in the first place in its entirety. Only a few people were endowed with that godly message. Now, Imam Ali makes that very, very clear in one of his sermons to the people of Kufa. And he says, where are the likes of the Sahaba of the Blessed Prophet amongst you? They who used to stand vigilant at night in devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whose forehead bore the marks of their adoration to God, whose stomachs, and of course I'm paraphrasing, whose stomachs were stuck to their backs due to excessive fasting and hunger for the sake of God, whose lips moved in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In another place, in Khutbah Shaqshaqiyya, which is quite eloquent, and people like Muhammad Abdu and others verify that such eloquence is that of Imam Ali, he talks about the political state of the Muslim community by the time he holds the reins of Khilafah. He said, here I found the community like an unruly camel that is rushing to its own destruction. Now he said, my task is this, that I control it. But if I were to pull the reins of the camel sternly, it would slit the nostrils of the camel and cause it to bleed to death. And if I were to let the reins loose, the camel will drag itself to its own destruction. He was explaining his own impossible situation at that point. That, look, this is how I find the community. It has moved off the tracks. It has lost that centricity and centrality with God. It has moved away from where the equilibrium that the Prophet created, where it has moved away from the position of equilibrium where the Prophet placed or intended to place it. Now, Khalifa Omar also, he stated words to the same effect. He said, after me, Ali would be the best leader. He would guide them aright. But will they be able to withstand his sense of justice? Omar admitted that Imam Ali was a person who could not waver in his resolve to establish justice and righteousness. But the people were not capable of withstanding his sense of justice. With the whole event of Saqifa, it becomes very clear that even the Sahaba were not well endowed with the godly message that the Prophet was imparting to them or had imparted to them. We are seeing this human flaw and human weakness from the time of the demise of the Blessed Prophet and maybe sometime before that. So the people who came into Islam were not necessarily endowed with that spiritual message of Islam and the one that God was giving to them. And at that point, had Imam Ali become the Khalifa, the very first Khalifa, he would have had 24 years at his disposal to rectify the situation and lead it in the right direction. But unfortunately, history bears witness to whatever happened. Now comes Imam Ali. But I will say this much, that Imam Ali was not politically ambitious. If we understand political ambition to mean getting sway of power and control over people, he was not interested in that at all. When Uthman was killed, and when he was offered the Khilafah, he said to Talha and Zubair, one of you take the Khilafah, and I will work under your administration as one of your ministers. He wasn't interested, but by that time, actually, the people had become such that it was a difficult situation to control and to bring back on the pedestal of godliness. In one of his letters to Muawiyah, who is considered to be a very accomplished and a sharp politician, Imam Ali writes that had I wanted, I could have outwitted you at any point. But my own sense of justice and righteousness does not allow for me to do such a thing. He was very principled. I'm just digressing a little from my talk. Today, if we were to look at Muawiyah and Imam Ali, we will see Muawiyah was a shrewd politician. Like any other shrewd politician who attained control over a community, establish an authoritative position for themselves, and rejoice with power. They are power-driven. And that is something that the human community frowns upon even today. When we look at our own PM and the way he came into office, and what happened subsequent to that with the whole Brexit saga, and now the way we are dealing with the war in Ukraine, we can see that a lot, it leaves a lot to be desired. This is not a righteous example that a state needs. These are mere politicians who play around with human sentiments, who gain sway and control. But when you look at Imam Ali now, after 1,400 years, we are filled with wonder. We are filled with awe and appreciation in terms of his righteous conduct and character, his just nature. And we say that actually, if we can embody within our leadership the character and the conduct of Imam Ali, the human community can become a better, more just and righteous community. So we see that Imam Ali wasn't interested in political power, but he was interested in leaving behind a godly example, a righteous human example that can be emulated by humanity at large. In fact, he was looking at human journey to completion towards the end of its journey, because humanity has to complete itself. And the humanity can only complete itself by embodiment of truth, righteousness, and sense of justice and fair play and nobility. And Imam Ali left that example. You see, the human community will never be successful until the 8 billion individuals within the human community understand the meaning of righteousness, justice, selflessness, human nobility, and start living by standards of human nobility and justice. And that is the example Imam Ali was concerned with leaving behind. Now, if you look at how he embodied God in his own person, there are many instances in which Imam Ali could have made gains for himself, and he would have been justified. For example, when Muawiyah's forces attacked Muslim lands, and of course some Jewish people were transgressed upon, Humayl ibn Ziyad writes to Imam Ali, and he says, but if we want, we can have an attack mounted against the towns from which they attacked us. There can be a response we can offer. Now, Imam Ali writes back to Humayl, and he says, Humayl, I am amazed and baffled that you even write this to me. Now, imagine the tone of his letter. He says, I'm baffled and amazed that someone like you can actually make such a suggestion like this to me. He said, the people, the perpetrators of the crime have long gone. And by our reprisal, we will be attacking innocent people who are nothing to do with the crime. What an amazing understanding of the rights of humanity, of nobility, righteousness, and godliness. Today, our bombardment of enemy areas is justified on the basis of collateral damage, or on the basis of ends justify means. Imam Ali did not understand this notion of ends justifying means. He said, this is wrong, blatantly wrong, it cannot be done. If God wills for these people to be overcome and justice to prevail, then God is more than capable of bringing it about through righteous means. I do not need to revert to or resort to wrongfulness to combat wrongfulness. And his epic statements when Abu Sufyan and the clan went to him and they said, if you want, we can assist you. And Ibn Abbas went to him and said, if you want, we can assist you to retrieve your right from Khalifa Abu Bakr or Abu Bakr ibn Abi Quhafa. He said, why should I resort to falsehood to combat falsehood? What a phenomenal understanding this man has. That is the embodiment of God, to be able to leave behind your primordial urges to gain what is rightfully yours at the expense of righteousness and the long-term well-being of the community. When he came into office, it was very imprudent of Imam Ali by our political standards to remove the governors instilled by Osman, knowing what the Bani Umayyah could do. He said, I know this. He said, I know this, that it is imprudent for me to remove these people and that it will go against me. He knew it. But he said, what can I do? How can I have such people at the helm of authority when such people flaunt the laws of Islam? And they are known for their injustices and their corrupt nature. What he was doing was acting in accordance with his godliness. He was endowed with that godly sentiment. Now, people often misjudge Imam Ali, and I have found our local leaders who are very stern, who are very unforgiving. And they say, well, Imam Ali established justice, so we will pursue justice at all expense. No, that's not Imam Ali's justice. Imam Ali's justice was not torture other people, transgress against them, and destroy the community further under the pretext of justice. Imam Ali's justice was, let people reform. If they can reform, then let them reform and still be the part of the community. Greater justice is in reform. Greater justice is in the well-being of people. So therefore, he tells Malik Ashtar, he says, forgive people. If they offer excuses, accept their excuses. Do not expose the weaknesses of the people. Cover their weaknesses as God covers your weakness. Do know you're responsible for me, Ali, who has placed you there and my example, as I am responsible to Allah. And when it comes to Allah, Allah is all forgiving, with amendments being made, with reformation. So Imam Ali's sense of justice was not this notion of strict justice that we guys understand, that I will do justice by exposing people and bringing them to justice and giving them their fair punishment. Imam Ali's sense of justice was, no, now you do righteous, I will cover your faults, be good for the community, and let the community progress through a godly example. But whilst there is an ungodly example, I will not tolerate you. Not that I will hate you or expose you or start punishing you in public. That is a misunderstanding of what Ali ibn Abi Talib was all about. Then again, Ibn Abbas finds Imam Ali mending the torn slipper that he was wearing. And he had seen the amount of wealth that was distributed at the death of Talha and Zubair, and how lavishly the Umayyads lived under the Caliphate of Osman, Khalifa Osman, and how lavishly Osman lived, Khalifa Osman. I'm not here to discredit any Khalifa or anything. I'm just giving historical facts. Yes? It's not my job to say Osman was bad or good or whatever. Just as Muslim ibn Aqil was asked by Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, what do you say about Osman? Muslim ibn Aqil said, leave aside Osman, let me tell you what you are and your father was. Ibn Abbas said to Imam Ali, he said, is this what I see of you as the Khalifatul Muslimin? Whereas those who have gone before you lived so lavishly. Imam Ali responded, he said, Ibn Abbas, if I cannot rid poverty, and if I cannot bring about social justice within the Ummah, then your Khilafah means less to me than this torn sandal that I am mending. That is the godly example of this man. That is way beyond our petty understanding of Khalifa and politically right and politically wrong. The Muslim Ummah needed the example of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali ibn Abi Talib was not concerned with being the Khalifa or not. And we need to get this right in our heads. He wasn't concerned with it. He says, and these words are repeated by Hussein ibn Ali, ما كان منا منافسة للسلطان ولا لحصول فضول الحطام. Whatever I am contending for is not in order to compete for authority, nor for the attainment, for the perishment or perishing bounties of this world of yours. He says this is very, very small. He said in his Shakshakiyah khutbah, he said, had the people not crowded me and forced me to accept the Khilafah, and had it not been for the covenant that I have given to God to retrieve from the tyrannical, oppressive people and to give to the poor people and to restore social justice, I would have cast the reins of this Khilafah upon its own back, as I did so in the case of the first and the second and the third Khalifas. So Imam Ali has to be understood very differently, not in the way in which we are trying to understand him. Now let me just give a few examples. My time is over. I'll take another 5 odd minutes. Give a few examples of the nobility of this great man. My God, the godliness of this great man. Of course, in the discussions to come, we are going to talk about Imam Ali's notion of God and the way in which he relates to God. But the nobility of this man, it's just unbelievably godly. And of course, because of the fast, I'm stuttering a little, so forgive me. It just shows I'm fasting, yes. I just wanted to make that clear. That I still believe in fast and I'm fasting, yeah? All right, salawat. But if you want a good lecture, then catch me after the fast. So the example of this dear Imam, amazing, amazing. He said, had I wanted, I could have partaken of the sweetest honey. I could have consumed the best of wheat. I would have worn the softest garment. But does it befit that people who call me Amirul Mu'mineen are of empty bellies and thirsty livers, that I should satiate myself and leave them starving? There might be an empty stomach in Yamama, and I should feed myself. Should I not share in their tribulations and in their difficulties? Should I be called Amirul Mu'mineen and enjoy the glory of this position and then not share in their tribulations? Look at his godly example. Whereas he could have justified, as I would justify, that I am in this position, I need these things for myself. He is that godly man. He's saying, no, even if a single stomach is starving, I will not eat. Or an occasion, he is unwell. Al-Hassan says to him, oh father, allow me to distribute food. He said, oh Hassan, and what if you forget a single mouth? Will I be able to stand in front of Allah and have this poor person say to Allah that in the Khilafah of Ali, I starved on this night? He said, oh Hassan, allow me to fulfill my duty towards humanity. You do yours. I would stand bare feet upon thorns all night long, says Ali. I will be dragged upon my face rather than appear before Allah and the Habib of Allah and my Habib in a state in which I have oppressed a single creature of theirs. Look at Ali. How can you comprehend this man? In another place, Ali says, مَا لِعَلِيٍّ وَنِعْمَةٍ لَا يَبْقَى وَلَضَّةٍ يَفْنَى, or to that effect. What cause does Ali have with bounties that will perish and pleasures that shall not last? وَإِنَّ دُنْيَاكُمْ هَذِهِ, and this dunya of yours, لَأَهْوَنُ عِنْدِي, is more petty in my sight than a leaf being chewed by a moth. Such is Ali. Now, my time is finished, but look at his godliness and the way he is so focused and mindful. When Umar was assassinated, Khalifa Umar, there was a frenzy. Amirul Mu'mineen has been killed, they said. Umar gave himself the title Amirul Mu'mineen. So anybody seeing fleeing was being attacked. What happens when the fateful sword descends upon the forehead of Blessed Ali? He said, Abdul Rahman ibn Muljim is my assassin. Don't kill anybody else. Can you imagine the panic of a strike of a sword upon your head? The confusion, the dismay. And this man is so mindful, so conscious, so fixed on the welfare of his community and his responsibility to God that he cries out, do not kill anybody. Abdul Rahman is my assassin. His head is in the lap of Al-Hassan. Abdul Rahman is brought before him. Ali awakens. He looks at Abdul Rahman. Hassan, untie your captive. But he is your assassin, O father. Do you not see the fear of death prevail upon his face? Do you not see how his face has changed color? Untie him, O Hassan, I say. They untie him. He says to Abdul Rahman ibn Muljim, was I not a good imam? He said, O Ali, hal tunqidh man fin nar? O Ali, and he recites the verse of the Quran, shall you save the one whose path is within hell? Imam Ali said, yes, you have spoken the truth. Then Imam Ali looks at Hassan, and this is Ali. He says, I beseech you for my right upon you. Feed him of what you feed, and give him to drink of what you drink. If I survive this blow, then it is my right to forgive him and to forego. If I die from this wound, then it is your right to avenge my blood and to put him to death. Strike him once, as he has struck me once. Such is the great master. Such is the great master. I will narrate on behalf of the Dhakirin. Ali has been taken home. He says, stop here. Companions scatter. They say, why? He says, least my daughters see me in this state, unable to bear the state. They scream out aloud and beat their heads. I will say, Ali, there shall come a day when this prized daughter of yours shall ascend upon a hill, and beneath shall be her brother. Upon his chest shall be the foot of Shimmer, and upon his neck shall be the dagger. And she shall cry out, is there not a Muslim who will save Aba Abdullah? ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون.